Hi guys, welcome to another tactical video. This is for the Sisters of Battle, or Adeptus Sororitas Codex, and it is about the Battle Conclave. So basically a Battle Conclave, very briefly, is a slotless HQ option, so it doesn't take up any HQ slots. You can take one Battle Conclave for every priest you have in your army. So obviously that is a lot of potential Battle Conclaves if you run any kind of priests, and of course that includes Uriah Jacobus as well, so you could have a total of 6 Battle Conclaves in a single detachment. So yeah, quite a lot. Okay, so the Battle Conclave itself is at least 3 Arco-Flagellents, although it can go up to 10. And you can upgrade, and I say that with quotes, you can upgrade the Arco-Flagellents to either Difficult Assassins or Crusaders. And those are your options. So these are very, very similar to the things that you get in the Inquisition Codex, because they are pretty much the same thing, but of course you don't get Joe Carew, you don't get the Demon Host or the Psychers or the Priests as an option. Of course we can take Priests as independent characters instead, which is better, but you know. So yeah, it's a lot more limited in many ways, but you know, you got 3 very distinctly different things. Now, the obvious thing, of course, is that they are all built for close combat. Arco-Flagellents put out a lot of attacks, especially on the charge. They have decent weapon skill, they're strength 5, which is really nice, and they come with feel no pain. So they're not too shabby at all, really. They are incredibly weak defensively. Like, they have no save whatsoever. They don't even have Shield of Faith. Yeah, they don't have Axe of Faith, so, you know, a priest in that unit is not going to help them at all, because they don't have any saves to reroll, for instance. They could get reroll to wound and it could give them hatred, but you know, he's the only guy with a save in there other than the feel no pain, so they would die easy to rapid fire unless you get some kind of tanking thing in there. Okay, but yeah, basically they're designed to drown enemies in attacks, and they can do that pretty well. The hard part is getting them into close combat, so they're kind of like Repentia, except they would go at initiative, such as it is, and the problem is, of course, they're initiative free like everything, so they're probably going to last anyway, and they, of course, do not get any of the Ignores cover thing. But they're 10 points a model, so they're fairly cheap. The best ways of using Arco-Flagellents, basically either you have something in there to tank for them, there's some kind of psychic powers being cast on them, which of course you'd need allies for, or they have some kind of protection that they can assault from. For instance, some kind of building would work, a bastion would work fine, or if you again allied in a Storm Raven or a Land Raider or something like that. So yeah, can be limited. You could get them across the table in other ways, but basically if your opponent puts anything on Arco-Flagellents, like any kind of diverts any kind of firepower or anything like that, then those flagellants are going to struggle. Even if they get assaulted, they're going to struggle because they tend to be going last. So even like tactical marines could do a good job because they're just going to crunch through those Arco-Flagellants to start with, and you know, you get a lot of attacks back on the charge, which is nice, but you know, you may struggle to actually kill those Space Marines and blah blah blah. So yeah, they work best against squishier troops, picking on that kind of thing. And there you go. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing, which is Crusaders. Crusaders basically are a walking Storm Shield, and it's kind of funny because they're the exact price of a Storm Shield. So unlike a Storm Shield upgrade for a character, you're actually getting ablative wounds. So if you consider, well, we'll come across that in a minute. So basically you have 3 up invulnerable save on these. They also have flak armor for a 5 up armor save, which is not going to matter much unless you're facing something that ignores your invulnerable save, or of course you're facing grav weaponry, in which case they're slightly more susceptible than Arco-Flagellants or Difficults. They also have a power weapon, so this is a good deal really, because you know, these things cost 15 points each on their own, so basically you're getting 30 points of upgrades on this extra model. Now of course you would lose those upgrades, but they only cost 15 points, so you know, it's a very, very good deal in the pure numbers game. Okay, the power weapon can be any type of weapon you want, so that's really nice. Yeah, they have low initiative, They're initiative 3. They have low strength as well. They're only strength 3 this time. Toughness 3 as usual, you know. I think weapon skill 4. So not really that good for combat. Personally, my favourite thing to do with them is to give them a power axe. Because then, you know, that initiative 3 doesn't matter. They're going last. At least they're strength 4 then instead. And of course they ignore all armour. So, you know, with a 3-up invulnerable save, they've got a good chance of surviving there. Crusaders do really, really well with priests in the unit. Purely because they get that reroll saves in the assault phase. And of course the reroll to hit. And if you've got several priests, then reroll to wound as well. So, you know, they can do really, really well there. They're not going to kill much on their own. But they are very good at tying up enemy units if they're particularly bad. And of course, with priest support with reroll saves, it's really hard to get through 3-up rerollable invulnerable save. Where they struggle, of course, is in shooting because they die easier than Space Marines. Of course, they die just as easy as your Battle Sisters because, you know, mass shots, blah blah blah, and you are losing slightly more every time you lose a Crusader. But as I say, they're cheap. So here's where they really work. If you have an independent character in the unit, say for instance a Canoness with the Cloak of Saint Aspera, so she's re-rolling all her saves. Okay, anything that would ignore her armor save, you could look out there on a 2-up. Okay, which is a good save, and if you know, if you're successful, then you can put it onto a Crusader who's nearby, and then they can use their 3-up invulnerable save. So, and if they fail that invulnerable save, you've lost a Crusader, okay? What you haven't lost is a wound on the character or the character themselves if it would have caused instant death. So that is much better than in most cases when a character has a Storm Shield themselves, because they would take the hit if they fail that save. This time, you know, they automatically... Basically, if you fail that save either way, you haven't lost anything on the character. So that's where Crusaders really excel, and that's what they're for. Okay, so they are good. I mean, all these things are good, but you know, that's basically what they're there for. And if they get some attacks in, that's brilliant. You know, it's a bonus. Okay, they're still hitting that power weapon, so it's nice. So the last thing is the Difficult Assassins. I have covered these in a video before. These are a hammer blow unit, just like the Arco-Flagellents. These are my favourites. Basically, they have a 5-up invulnerable save. They're weapon skill 5, which is really nice. So you're obviously hitting on 3s in most cases. They're initiative 6 and strength 4, and they have 2 power swords each. Sadly, they used to be power weapons, so you could change them. And the best combination I found was power sword and power maul. Then you could choose which one to use. Of course, now it's just power swords, so if you really want to get the most out of these guys, you want those priests for rerolls to wound, and of course rerolls to hit. These basically work by pouring on attacks onto enemies. They'll obviously kill Space Marines because they're not getting any saves, but they will pretty much kill anything that's infantry. Doesn't matter how badass it is, if it's got some priest support, this unit, they can kill them in one turn because they're usually going first at that initiative 6. That's massive. And you know, if you don't have better than a 3-up armor save, you're not getting any save. They'll be rerolling to wound, and of course they're rerolling to hit, and they're probably hitting on 3s as well, or at least on 4s. So very, very powerful. Of course, they are weak defensively, though they are slightly stronger than the Arco-Flagellents because at least they always get that save, being an invulnerable save. And of course, if you got reroll saves for priests as well, then you know that's another bonus. So, you know, with priest support, they can be very, very powerful. Personally, I like to run my Battle Conclave on its own. So I use it as a separate unit, and as a result, I do like to take 2 priests with it. Often with one of them having Litanies of Faith. Benefit of the priests, of course, they get slight shooting attack, and of course they keep them defended, and the entire unit can proceed forward, and when they do get into the assault, they're going to be way, way more effective. So, you know, they can kill things. Usually I take the full 10 Difficult Assassins. Now, what a lot of people do is take Difficult Assassins and then, of course, Crusaders, and they'll take maybe 3 or 4 Crusaders and the rest is Difficult Assassins. And that makes sense. Here's the thing, right, because obviously they're using those Crusaders to protect them. Crusaders die quite easily from shooting, okay? obviously they're twice as defensive from shooting as difficult assassins. Here's the thing: if you fail those saves, and you've got a 33% chance on each save you make on a Crusader to fail that save, okay, you have lost a Crusader, okay. You're just as likely to lose, well, you're more likely to lose a difficult assassin, okay. Say you lost difficult assassins as well, the same amount, okay. Fine, that's the same thing, okay. Say you lose all the Crusaders, blah blah blah, you have 6 difficult assassins left, okay. Say you lost 4 difficult assassins and you just had difficult assassins in the unit, you have 6 difficult assassins left, okay, that's fine. Say the unit doesn't get shot at all, okay, and you get into combat, okay, what happens then? You've got 4 Crusaders and 6 difficult assassins in the unit, or you have 10 difficult assassins in the unit. Which one's going to do better when it gets into combat? This is the thing that makes the difference here, okay? Even if you did get shot at, but not that much, or like maybe the shooting wasn't that effective before you got in, which is often the case, okay? Say you lost a couple of Crusaders, okay? You still got 2 Crusaders and 6 difficult assassins, whereas otherwise you'd have 8 difficult assassins. So you can see, if I lose a difficult assassin, I've lost a difficult assassin. If I lose a Crusader, I've lost a Crusader, and I've still got some Crusaders, and I've still effectively lost more difficult assassins. So I would rather have all those difficult assassins and have the potential to have all of them on the assault than have some Crusaders there protecting them that might help or might not. So that's just the way I like to do it, and it works pretty well so far because I combine that with the effects of the rest of my army, so they eventually, you know, get into combat and they can do something. So yeah, that's pretty good in that sense. So I can see a lot of people not agreeing with me on this, but you know, that's how it tends to work out in my games. So yeah, Crusaders are brilliant if you are basically trying to take a retinue for protecting an independent character, like a Canoness or Uriah Jacobus or something like that. If you want to keep your HQ alive, or maybe even an allied HQ, you want to keep them alive for some reason, they're brilliant. They're basically portable storm shields, so you know, it's good to have them. Other than that, I would recommend the difficult assassins. Arco-Flagellents can work, but you would need a lot more of them, or you'd need a hell of a lot of units to distract the opponent enough to work, and they rely on your rolls to do well, so you may need priest support to get the most out of them, although I could see a case of keeping them cheap. You know, a squad of 10 is 100 points, so you know, or you could mix them with Crusaders. I honestly haven't tried them enough for that. I've tried them a few times. Generally speaking, they're just so defensively limited that without priest support they're going to struggle, and as soon as you put priest in there, it becomes a bigger target, and you know, let's say squishy, that priest isn't going to last too long, or at least the Arcos won't, and you'll have to hop into another unit. So yeah, they can work, but you know, as I say, they're kind of like Repenter in that they need a bit more support, especially since they'll be going after most of their targets. So the right kind of targets for basically a Battle Conclave depends on what you take. As I say, if you've got Crusaders, then they want to be counter-attack and some kind of retinue for an independent character, or they can just tie up the really nasty monstrous creatures, that kind of thing. Maybe that new Bloodthirster, you know, they could take that. Arco-Flagellents, they want to pick on the weak infantry, especially if they've got low initiative, you know, the big hordes, and just pile in there, especially if they haven't got much for an armor save. They can wipe big blob squads pretty easily, so you know, that's what they do. And difficult assassins are kind of like your specialist killers. You can point them at anything and they will wipe that squad. Of course, where this doesn't really apply is vehicles, but even against vehicles, you know, if you've got the priest in there, you've got so many attacks that you've got a very, very good chance of just glancing that vehicle to death. So, you know, you've got a good chance to them. So, would you take a Battle Conclave? I personally take them quite often. In my experience, they actually do more than Retributors. However, one of the things I found at 2000 points level especially is I have enough points for both Repentia and the Difficult Assassin, and of course Penitent Engines. these are our three main close combat hard hitters, and these are the things that win you games. What happens usually, though, is that one squad or the other, either the Difficult Assassins or the Repentia, do not get into assault, and basically don't really do anything in the game other than stand around, do counter assault if needed, which they never really do, or just hold an objective. And the thought occurs that, you know, little impact as they may have, Retributors or another Exorcist can do that kind of job, just sit back and at least they can shoot. So, you know, I'm not necessarily certain I need them both, but I think also having them both is what's causing that, is because the opponent can only really focus on one, and one of them is going to get in, and, you know, that's the problem. So, you know, it's still working, you know, it's working well, but I think it might be slightly overkill on the close combat. So, against certain enemies I might consider taking something else than one of those two, and I'd probably drop the Repentia, to be honest, because they're very expensive. So yeah, that is kind of it. The last thing I was going to say was, even with Difficult Assassins, one of the things they've been very good at is holding up things like Walkers, Death Dreads and Dreadnoughts and that kind of thing, even the new funky Space Wolf ones, with some pre-support in there for reroll saves. They can get into combat and just lock them down for the entire game, or until something comes along that can kill them, such as Penitent Engines or Repentia. They can get in and then kill them. One of the things I have been doing when I've got the points is putting Melter Bombs on at least one of the priests, because, you know, that reroll to hit and blah blah blah. It gives you a little bit of killing power against those Dreadnoughts, other than just trying to glance it with a crack grenade. So, yeah, in those kind of situations you can at least tie things up and take them out of the game effectively, because, you know, if you reroll saves, you've got a very, very good chance of just bogging them down, and everything's an invulnerable save, of course. And because of that, you know, you can do it well enough with the Difficult Assassins that I don't think you need the Crusaders. But, you know, Crusaders are nice models, they're very effective in the right situations. I think the right situations for them are just a bit more niche and, you know, a little bit harder to engineer than Difficult Assassins, which can more or less deal with everything. They're a lot more versatile. So that is why I favour those. If you've never used Battle Conclave, I highly recommend it. They're a lot of fun to use. They're a definition of a glass cannon unit, but, you know, they do really, really well, and there's nothing quite as fun as, like, basically beating orcs at their own game and just picking up a fistful of dice, rolling it, and then just, like, re-rolling hits and wounds, and, yeah, oh look, your unit's dead. So, it's a lot of fun. Okay, so hopefully this video is helpful. If you liked it, remember to click like. Feel free to comment any questions below. I will get back to you as soon as I can, and basically that's it.